What's up everybody, how is it going? I have so amazing tutorial for you. Today I'll show you how I created this cinematic animation background. I was inspired to create this art by scene from The Fall of the House of Usher by Netflix, as well as a cover of one of the episodes. For those who haven't yet seen this serial, my recommendation, but now I purposely reconsider how to make this atmospheric background animation of an abandoned house in a Blender, and I'll prove to you this is pretty easy to do even if you're a beginner. But before we get started with the tutorial, I wanna let you know that you may download all the material from this video, like the Blender scene and compositing setup with my color grading setup, which I'll show you in this video, from my Patreon. I'll have the link in the video description if you would like to download it and also support my channel. So I'm not going to focus on modeling of this surrounding. As you can see, it's pretty simple scene. Walls, windows, some furniture and armchair, which I found on Sketchfab. Let's not waste time and start with what I always teach you, the light. I really like this background. Unfortunately, I didn't find a high quality copy, so it's just a screenshot, but the light is quite clearly visible here. Cold light somewhere out of window or holes in the top, and warm light from the fire. In the serial there were a lot of warm lights yet. I'll think about whether I will make them or not, but I like the color and light with the cold and warm combination, like teal and orange, rather a popular color scheme in the movies. So let's start with this. I add a new plane in order to add a new material to the scene and name it gray. I need this for override material. All objects in this scene will be equally gray, which allows me to not focus on material now and make a basic light. Turn on viewport shading and see that everything equally gray. That's what I need. For the beginning I will make the global light rather dark, but colder, closer to the reference. I'll add spotlight and place it outside the window, probably yes. Also no, let me move it here, so when I'll add a volume scatter to see the rays of light. I'll add a simple area light outside the window, because there must also be light. I change the blending value of the light to make it softer and decrease the size, and now I wanna move it and rotate more closer to my reference. This light will be as cold as the light behind the window. Next I add light to the fireplace, increase the radius and make this light in warm color, like fire. Not so powerful, somehow like this. And I immediately want to add a little fake light to emphasize the chair, because this is hero object. The simple area light is warmer as light from the fireplace. Place it some kind of like here to emphasize the light from the fireplace. Duplicate this light and place it somewhere behind the armchair. I also duplicate the color of the cold light from the window to add a little of it to the side of armchair. And let's add another source of light behind the camera. Now it may seem that everything is okay, but my experience tells me that we will need this light later, because when we add materials it will become darker here. So preliminary now looks as I need. Of course later we will adjust the power of lights, but in order to start making materials it's enough. So let's take away our gray override material, we don't need it anymore. And add a cube for the volume scatter. Scale it and add a new material. Delete standard material and find volume scatter. Connect it to the volume. To begin with, I make a rather low value and will slightly be increasing it to see light rays. I wanna move the volume cube behind the chair, because I count on volume right there. I don't need too much volume in the foreground, somehow like this. I do display as bounds to hide this cube, more precisely make this cube visible like bounding box in my viewport. For the render it still be a volume cube. Okay, how to create light rays from this light, some kind of we can see here. Blender gives us an amazing opportunity to work with lights and create light rays in so simple way. I just added dust texture and connect it to the emission node in this light. I make a copy of this light to show you how it works. Now using this dust map I can impact the light, and this way allows me to create light rays easily. As you see in the preview render, it already works. I have a detailed video about light and how using this way creates atmospheric light and rays on my channel, so if you wanna know more, a link to this tutorial in the description. Also, I make a copy of this light to make a variety of rays from this light. And let's take another look how to create fire in the Blender without any simulation. For this I already added it to my scene plane with the texture of the fire, but this is a movie footage of fire as we can see in the viewport. I just need to delete some parts of this plane to leave only the fire part, which I will be using in a fireplace. Rotate it and place it into the fireplace. Place it behind the firewood, and that's all. As you can see, edit the fire without simulation in Blender, it's so easy like create light rays. Finally about light, I'll add a plane and put it outside the window to add here emission material. Since the main global light in my scene is absent and there is darkness, I can get rid of these dark holes outside the window, which cannot be here since we already have lights there. Some kind of like this I need. My main light setup literally consists of couple of lights, but it already looks pretty epic. So let's go to make materials. Since the scene pretty dark by default, I can focus on the main materials which are exactly visible in my camera, and we can simplify some backgrounds material to not waste much time. I'll start with the floor. I have such a texture from Megascans for this, so I press Ctrl-Shift-T, select all textures that I have, and the Blender connects them automatically to the right sockets as a principal BSDF. I slightly remove this iteration of basic texture because it should look like an old wood floor. But this is still quite pure material for such an abandoned house, so we need to add some dirt to this material using mix color node and some dirt map combination with the basic texture. Maybe it's even better to use it as a mask and make the color as there remains of paint on the floor. I can experiment with different textures to find more attractive combination. Maybe this one would be great, just move it to see the texture more in my camera. This is how it looks like, quite interesting, but still quite clean. I take another dirt map, maybe some kind of this one, and we'll see how it works. Again mix node, but I will do multiply. And it's already turned out to the interesting material. Next we also need to add these two dirt maps in the bump. I'll just add the bump node, plug in the first map, and the mix node will merge with the existing normal map. We'll do the same for the second map, and it looks pretty cool now. This way of creating some old or vintage material will work for all materials in this scene. This is a basic principle to create smart or complex materials in a Blender. Let's make the material for the fireplace, and I want to show you a little bit another way. I would like to make something like this material. The same painted wood material, but slightly dirtier. Let's try to take this as a basic material, then add paint and dirt. Just slightly raise the brightness and change the color with mix node. Of course, we need to add a dirt map. Today everything will be built with dirt map. By the way, now it becomes clear that it's quite dark in this scene. As I said before, it will be necessary to add more light soon. So I'll take that light behind the camera and put it somewhere here to highlight a little bit in the shadow. It will be not so dark here. You know what else we can do? Since I will do animation, it's so important for me to have the render time not so long for each frame. I'm definitely not going to spend 10, even 20 minutes on one frame as I can afford myself when I'm doing a simple static render. But in this condition, this cannot be avoided. I will slightly increase the power of each light and decrease the exposure value in the render settings in order to return the necessary contrast. I will use exposure to reduce the brightness in the scene to achieve a dramatic result and play with it, what it gives to me. My scene gets enough light not to be so noisy in the render. In fact, it looks like this, but due to the exposure value, I'm already reaching the required depths. This will allow me render faster, since the time of the render is affected by the sample's value, which also depends on how much light you have in the scene. A small life hack: if you have a dark or night scene, just increase light power and decrease exposure value. The final render of this animation on my RTX 3060 took me 1 minute and 40-50 seconds per frame in 4K in these light conditions. Now we can see materials and objects more clearly. Back to the fireplace. Of course we need to use dirt, but let's add it not along the entire object. I wanna use ambient occlusion as a mask connected through the color ramp. I'll turn on the render in this window, but turn off scene light to see in more detail how it works. With color ramp I can reduce or increase the impaction of ambient occlusion. It looks quite interesting. I guess we need more cracks, this is old fireplace. Maybe like this one. And duplicate this material to all the elements of fireplace. Select everything and press Ctrl L, choose link material and boom, looks amazing. I will be correcting all materials in the final stage of working when I have all materials in my scene to see how they look compared to other materials, and maybe we will reduce some dirt and ambient occlusion in some places. For the wall I use simple texture of concrete from Megascans, it itself looks correct here. In general I like how it looks. I guess it deserves a like under this video for me, yes? Well, the only one thing I thought of changing the camera angle a little bit. I think there's too much empty space on the top of the picture, so I duplicate the main camera to leave these settings if I want to return to it later. I'll slightly move down the camera to make the floor more visible, it seems even better now. Let's take a quick look at the material of curtains and windows. Other materials, as I said before, have the same building principles. For the window I used a wood texture and also added the remains of paint, just adding the already popular mix node. There I used reflection map from this material as a mask, so the remains of the paint appear where this map was affected. The curtains as a simple fabric material, I just add noise texture as the alpha channel to make the light pass through them. Nevertheless, I will raise the exposure a little bit because it seems still dark. It will be better than remove the exposure on post-production. I made a test render and now I propose to work on the color and add post effects. Thanks to real-time compositing in a Blender, I can do color grading without spending a lot of time trying to achieve the same result by adjusting the color of light and exposure. But the first things, I'll add the node brightness contrast and increase the contrast and brightness. Then I'll find perhaps the most important and interesting node is color balance. And already here I will try to achieve the desired color. Gain is responsible for white point, lift for black point, and gamma is overall gamut. Here I can rise in shadow or lower shadow, the same for highlights and the entire gamma of my picture. Another interesting node for color grading is hue correct. I can adjust separately each color, working with saturation or using hue to move this color closer to another shade. Like in this art, I want to exaggerate the warm and blue color in order to fit to teal and orange style. A node which allows me to add more cinematic magic is glare. Here the main thing is not to do too much. Okay, this is my main compositing setup for color grading in Blender. I will also add usual node hue saturation to make this art more cinematic and decrease the saturation value to make this art a little bit desaturated. Okay, this looks cool and I like it now. Let's return to 3D viewport. I open Compositor instead of shader editor and turn on viewport shading. To see how it works in real-time Compositor, I change here to camera to make everything that happens in Compositing visible in my camera in 3D viewport. Here only one problem, we can see the glare node doesn't work correctly in this mode, so I turn off in Compositor. For the test render and final render, I of course turn on it again. I've heard that the problem will be solved in Blender 4.0 and glare will be working properly in the real-time Compositor. So, as you can see, my 3D viewport shows me all the color grading effects that I've done in compositing, and I can continue working on my scene with grade. So finally I decided to finalize the scene and add more small details. I added fire and light from it in the lamp and candle. I also added a tree outside the window to get rid of the holes here. On the table I found in the Blender kit a glass and a bottle of whiskey. It's only for entourage and details. I'm against alcohol abuse. Everything looks good, but before we're doing the final render, I would like to say a couple of words about animation. It's pretty simple background animation. We already talked about fire, so we need to make some flickering light in the Blender for this fire. It brings more realism to this cinematic animation. I select the fireplace light and open Graph Editor to do this. Set a key for the animation of the power value and add a noise modifier in the Graph Editor to this light. By default it works well, but I would like to play with scale and strings to get a flickering light similar to the frequency of flickering of the fire in this footage. I experimented with different settings, but I delighted with the strength around 8 or 12. You may notice that another moving object in the scene is the curtains. I made curtains when I did modeling of the scene, and this part is not a part of this video, but I will show you how I made animation and simulation of curtains. It's also as easy as everything in this art. The curtains is a simple plan that I subdivided and selected some points and went to the data, add a new vertex group. In physics I selected the close modifier, and in the shape I choose the same vertex group for the pin group. In a nutshell, this pin group will hold my curtains. Remains only add a wind and animation of curtains done. As I said, simple actions but amazing results. Now I am delighted with the result. I'll go to Compositing to set up my storage for my final animation using the file output node, but I wanna keep both the animation with all the post-processing that I did here and the clean render. I'll duplicate the file output node and connect it to my render directly. This may be useful to me if I wanted to do another color grade or experiment at all in the post-production. In this case I will not do render again, I can work with the sequence. By the way, I saved in image sequence, not in a video file, regular PNG sequence. Everything related to animations should be saved in sequence only. There is a situation when Blender crashed in the render process or something else. In the case of rendering everything into video file, you will have to render again from the beginning. Instead, you just start from the frame on which the render crashed, and that's all. In addition, saving in sequence, you save with minimal compression or without at all, which will be useful for further work with your animation if it's necessary. Before doing the final render, I noticed that the main armchair was not so good in the 4 resolution, so I changed it to another one which I also found on Sketchfab. So I waited until the animation was ready, and let's do the final touch. I want to add dust particles that flies in the light rays. I will open a new scene and compositing. Here is my animation, and here I also already have a sequence of dust. We can simply connect them using the mix node, but we need all this happen only in the light rays. To do this, I will need to create masks where I want the dust to be visible. In Blender this works a little bit differently than in the other compositing program like Nuke, but the principles are the same. In Image Editor I change View to Mask and add a new mask. Now I can draw the mask or add a standard mask like circle or square. I need the last one. This is quite suitable for the shape of the rays. Move it, scale it, and adjust to closer the rays. Place it here, and using combination Alt-S, I can add further to my mask to make it softer, because I want to see dust only in the rays, which slightly disappear into the darkness. I add another square mask and do the same. Add as many masks as I need in my render and return to compositing window. Now we need to use somehow these created masks. To do this, I will find the mask node where I can specify with which mask I need to find by name. Then everything is already familiar. Mix node, connect both sequences and use the mask as a factor. Dust appear in the light rays. You just need to change blending mode in the mix node to screen, and boom, now dust appear in my light rays only. For a more variety dust, I will make a combination of several transform nodes and flip. I will duplicate the same image sequence and connect everything using the mix node. This will give more variety to the particles. That's all. It remains only to add sound effect, and here is the final result. This was comprehensive video. If you still have any questions, write in the comments below. If you still not subscribed, please consider to subscribe and hit the like button. It will be the best help to my channel. I also remind you that I have Patreon where you may find materials from my almost every video on my channel, additional material and much more. All links in the description. Thank you for watching this video to the end, and see you in the next one.